Say hello to David Ubben, who covers college football for theathletic.com, is covering Tennessee football as well. David, thank you for the time as always. What do you think about what you've seen from Tennessee? How improbable maybe this run would have been to you at the start of the season for Tennessee to be 6-0 and included in your piece today of the contenders and pretenders in college football for the national title?
You know, it's interesting. I thought coming into the season, this team was pretty underrated. I thought they had a lot of upside, but I thought, it was odd to me they were unranked, but I thought they were probably one of the 15 best teams in the country. And I guess maybe I underrated them coming into the year because right now they certainly look like one of the 5 best teams in the country. I think that was the main thing that I took away from the Alabama game is, that wasn't really fluky. And we didn't really see a lot of things. Tennessee didn't do a lot of things they haven't done all year. And Alabama, penalties aside, especially in the first half, they played probably a C-plus game in the first half, but probably an A- game in the second half. And Tennessee just went toe-to-toe with them. And so, I think ultimately if you could do that against a pretty talented Alabama team, you can do that against just about anybody. And so this Tennessee team is really just playing at a really, really high level. And, even though, again, they were kind of underrated coming into the season, I don't think we had an idea just how underrated they were coming into the season.
Yeah, and David, last week from The Athletic, we cited the stop rate that the site that you're a part of keeps up with. And in your piece today, you had some numbers that show defensively Tennessee may not be great, but there are some statistical categories that show maybe, again, they're underrated. What have you seen with Tennessee's defense while the offense is leading the way, what the defense has also been able to do at times for the Vols?
Well, I think Josh Heupel said it really early on in his tenure, and I think, that was a big part of hiring Tim Banks. They want to have a defense that attacks and that focuses on producing negative plays and pressuring the quarterback. And this year, we've seen that, on our site. Today I wrote about Tennessee and their pressure rate, which is basically the amount of dropbacks that you sack the quarterback, hit the quarterback, or hurry the quarterback. 36.7%. That's the best in the SEC, 18th nationally. That's pretty good. And I think, when you look at Tennessee's defense and how they play, I think you can see that. And if you can affect the quarterback, you can force some inaccuracy and you can force them to have uncharacteristic nights. And I think we saw Tennessee force the issue quite a bit with Bryce Young. We've seen that really all year. That doesn't always mean sacks, but that means affecting the play, affecting the tempo, making quarterbacks uncomfortable. And if you can do that consistently, quarterback's going to have trouble making the plays that they would normally make. And so, yeah, Tennessee's pretty thin in the secondary. They've got some big questions at cornerback. We'll see what they have at safety. But, up front, they've been pretty good. And defensive yards per carry, they're 10th in the country. That's pretty good. So ultimately, if you can get after the passer, you can stop the run, and then you have an offense like Tennessee does, I think the idea that Tennessee just outscores everybody does not really jive with reality and with the numbers. If you want to look at total yards or, total passing yards given up and all that stuff, you can, but I think that's a bit of a uncivilized way of looking at defenses and assessing what teams really look like, because Tennessee, they're not a great defense, but they're a defense that plays the way that they want to play, can make some big plays, and made enough to beat Alabama. And at the end of the day, that's what we're talking about. Can you score more points than the other team? And to this point, Tennessee has done that in every game.
My man Ubben, do you think Tennessee this past weekend proved that they can handle high expectations and go out there and still perform?
I mean, I think so. I think no question. I think ultimately, I think they proved that to me at least. The Florida game was a very different feel, because the Florida game, you kind of knew this was not a great Florida team, but they'd been such a hurdle. And it was kind of you have a little bit to gain, but you have a lot more to lose. If Tennessee loses to Florida in that game, it's kind of like, well, maybe this team just isn't as good as maybe Tennessee fans had hoped. They get through that. They played really well in that game, and obviously that furious rally late, all that stuff not ideal, but Tennessee won that game. And you come to Alabama, obviously you have a lot of hype coming into the game. Game day's there. The crowd is going to be there. But you didn't really sense that nervousness from the fans, and I think on the field, that was a pretty solid Tennessee performance. I'm not sure they played quite the same level of complete game that they played against LSU, but they played good enough to win, and I think that, is really the mark of this team. I mean, I think the worst performance we've seen from them all year with Pitt And again, if you can play not very well and still win games, that's a sign of, I think, a pretty good team. I mean, obviously you want to play well every week, but Tennessee, struggled a little bit in the second half against Florida, struggled a little bit early against Pitt and a little bit late, and still were able to win those games. And I think that tells you a lot about the quality of a team. I mean, Pitt is probably a borderline top 25 team this year. Tennessee went on the road and beat them with a C-plus sort of game. So, we've seen them in that sort of situation, and Alabama with all the hype and all the hope and all that stuff. And now, we're going to learn a lot about this team in the back half of the season, because now every game other than Georgia is pretty much you got a ton to lose and not a lot to gain, because you just got to win games in South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, Vanderbilt, all these games. And then Georgia's the last one on your schedule until you get to Atlanta. If you get there, that you can really start playing with house money. So Tennessee's got to focus on not tripping up. I think those will be kind of, I don't know that I'd say they're more interesting tests, but we're going to learn a lot about these teams when they play teams like Kentucky and South Carolina that are good enough to beat you if you don't show up.
You mentioned underestimating this team early in the season. I think everyone underestimated this team for the most part. There were some people that said, hey, man, this team's going to win 10 games. They didn't know. They just felt that in their heart because that's what they wanted. But they didn't know. Everyone underestimated this team. What position group or what player has surprised you the most?
Well, I mean, Jalen Hyatt's having the year this year that I thought he was going to have last year. I think he's learned how to get off of press coverage, and they've worked him really nicely out of the slot. I think he got 9 of his 10 touchdown catches are out of the slot. But ultimately, Tennessee just had a ton of markers of a team that was going to make some noise this year. I mean, they brought back just about everybody. You lose Cade Mays, of course. But they brought back plenty of talent. No Velus Jones, but they've been really good at receiver. And you knew they had some bodies there and some guys like Jalen Hyatt that were sort of overdue for breakout seasons. But I think Bill Connolly's returning production list at 77%, that was like top 15 in the country from a 7-win team. I mean, the pieces were there for Tennessee to kind of have this. So I think that it's kind of shocking to look up and see Tennessee at number 3. But if you watch them on the field, it's not like you're sitting there going, how are they doing this? It's pretty clear how they're doing this. I think this offense taking the next step was something that I think was possible, and they've done that. And you sort of say, well, what can the defense do? You're not great at corner, but Tennessee can produce that havoc up front. And if you watch this team, they're not doing this with smoke and mirrors. They're just a good team, and they're playing maybe a slightly above their weight class. They're, 19th, I think, the 24/7 count composite. So it's still a pretty talented team. And, again, if you beat Alabama, you can beat anybody. And they're a team that's for the first time in a long time in Tennessee football, that you can go on the field with anybody and not only compete but win. And I think, for all the release and all the pride that was swelling through Knoxville on Saturday night, I think that is one thing that Tennessee fans, I think, are most proud of right now, is that it's been a long time since they've been able to say, hey, Tennessee's got a great shot to win every single game that they got. And, in a couple of weeks, they're going to go on the road and play the defending national champions and probably the number 1 team in the country. And if Tennessee wins that game, I'm not going to be shocked. I think that's going to be a really close game. And if Tennessee plays decently well, doesn't lose the turnover battle, they're going to have a chance in the fourth quarter to win. And again, that's just something Tennessee has not been able to do or say in so long.
I got to hog all the questions, so I'm sorry, Josh. I got one more question for you, David. Josh, over here, give me the look.
Like a receiver wanting all the targets.
I'm on my Jalen Hyatt right now. Give me all the balls. I want all the touchdowns. David, should Tennessee be number 1 in the country right now?
Well, it depends on what you want to do to vote. I think Tennessee, no question, has the best resume in the country. I don't even think that's close. LSU on the road, Pitt on the road, Florida at home, Alabama. That's an insane resume for the first, 6 games in a row, 6 games to start the season. Now, it just kind of comes down to where the pollsters want to go. I think if you were looking at the committee, if the committee was doing their poll, Tennessee would have a pretty strong case as the number 1 team in the country. I think most pollsters, for one, are unnecessarily static. They don't like moving teams around. I would never vote in the top 25. It just seems like a pain in the butt. But the voters generally don't look at resumes. They look at, well, who do I just think is good? And you've seen Georgia, you've seen Ohio State, you've seen Clemson, you've seen them have the pedigree that Tennessee has not had in recent years. So they're not going to be there. Is Tennessee the best team in the country? I'm not sure. I think they got a decent case for it. But they do have the best resume in the country. So if you're voting number one right now, you're probably voting them like that based on resume. And I think that's a pretty fair way to vote because, it's what have you actually done this year, not who do people think you are.
Mm-hmm. David Ubben, covering college football. Go read his piece as well on contenders and pretenders. Tennessee with a nice rating there among the teams that remain unbeaten in college football, getting ready for UT Martin and Kentucky, Georgia after that. So the tests continue, but Tennessee so far passing quite well. TheAthletic.com is where you can read his work. Find him on Twitter at David Ubben. Hey, David, thank you for the time as always. We appreciate it and hope to talk to you again soon.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
David.